Welcome to the Kelly Cardenas podcast, where attitude is everything. On today's show, what I loved about this is I got a chance to meet this man a while back. We met virtually, and he was so gracious. We had some time set up, and then it didn't work for either of us. And then I got a chance to be on his podcast, which I think, by the way, is the most important podcast out there. If you're listening to anything, you need to be listening to this podcast. It's the best message out there, and it's about dads. It's about dads being dads. It's about what dads do, what they should do, what they can do, but the reality of being a dad. The coolest thing too for me that I learned about Bryan was the fact that number one, like I think in his professional career, he's had two jobs. One was he retired from the Marine Corps, and number two, he works with Citizens Bank now. And most people don't have that type of longevity, but I want to thank him for his service, as all of us do out there listening or watching.
Thank you.
But also we want to thank you for not only your service, but also your service to your family, because your family has been number one over everything, which I think is amazing. So please, please, please welcome the host of the Dad Up podcast, but he is huge in the corporate world. He just doesn't like me to say that stuff, Mr. Bryan Ward.
Thank you very much, brother. I appreciate you having me on, man. I'm excited about this. I've been looking forward to this for a while.
Well, I think your message is so important, man. And I think that, like I said, if you're listening to this podcast right now, which we appreciate it, you should be listening to the Dad Up podcast. I don't care if you're a mom. I don't care if you're a dad. I don't care if you're a young kid, older kid, you're a young lady, a young man. You need to be listening to this, because Bryan takes the message that I believe that really can heal our culture. And it's not just about men, but it's about dads being dads. And that is so important. Why is this message so important? Why are you spending your time when you don't have to, and you have a lot of other things going on, Bryan? Why is it so important for you to be able to have the show Dad Up podcast?
Listen, I'm just trying to change the stigma of dads being the babysitter of their kids. I want to help families, not just dads, but moms too. I want to help them nourish their kids, because they're our future generation, they're our future world, right? So I want to help them really grow up to be just great role models to other people. And I think it starts in the home with the parents. And so that's really the reason why I do it. I want to help dads. I want to help moms. I want to help parents just be better people to their kids.
Generally, there's two scenarios when these things happen. Number one, you grew up in a perfect home, and you had everything you needed, and you wanted to pass that on because you got so many great things. The other scenario is that you saw some lack when you were growing up, or maybe there wasn't someone there for you, or pops wasn't there for you. What was it for Bryan?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's something that I think about often, because for me, I had two parents in the home my whole life. My parents are still married today. The one thing that they struggled with as parents, though, was being present. And for them, it wasn't so much that they didn't want to; it was that they had full-time jobs. And they just couldn't be there all the time for the kids the way that I feel a parent should be, especially dads. But so, I mean, I grew up playing sports. Uh, School was really a big factor in my life. My parents were really adamant about good grades and all that. But listen, Kelly, I can count on one hand how many sporting events they actually came to, because they had jobs. They couldn't be there to see me play. And because of that experience as a kid, when you're a kid playing in a sport, and you're on that field or you're on that court, you look up in the stands. You don't care about all the other people there. You want to see your support system. You want to see your family. And I didn't have that. I used to go to practices and games with my friends' parents. We didn't have rides. There were times where I rode my bike to practice or to a game because I didn't have a ride. And I knew, as a young man, I knew that I would not be that way with my kids when I had kids. And I'll tell you what, I can remember to this day when my older son was 4 years old and wanted to play baseball. And I took him to the little league table to sign him up for baseball. And they said, "Hey, we're short on coaches. We need a coach. You want to coach?" And I said, "Dude, I've never coached before in my life. I have no idea what I'm doing. No, I don't want to coach. I'll help out if need be, but I don't want to coach. And they said, look, they're four. They're going to play with grass. Just teach them how to hit a ball, how to throw a ball, and how to run the bases. You don't have to teach them anything else. So I decided to take on that role. And I can remember to this day driving to the first game, our very first game, and how nervous I was because I'd never coached an actual game before. And that responsibility of having to not only coach all these players, but having to teach them how to be successful at what they were doing, right? We wanted to win. I was very competitive, so I wanted to win. So yeah, I mean, with my parents, that wasn't there, and I wanted to make sure that I was there for my boys in that fashion. So yeah, I mean, that's why I am the way I am today.
So I always have wondered this because um, there's the preacher kid syndrome, right? So there's the preacher kid, the preacher's daughter. That's the girl you always wanted to hang out with because I mean, she was probably the wildest in the town. And a lot of times when a person has a phenomenal message like yourself and is doing great things like yourself, whether it be through the military or through Citizens Bank or through coaching and through all these things, a lot of times it's the kids of those amazing iconic figures that end up lacking exactly what the person, like they say that the cobbler's kids always have busted up shoes. How have you been able to, and I've watched this, how have you been able to be this beacon of light for all these people, inspire all these people, and still make sure that that light is shining on your family?
Ooh, man, that's a good question. Um, i- Listen, at the end of the day, my family comes first. So regardless if it's my job or coaching, like you know this, I coach right now at the high school level. My boys are out of high school, right? It's about balance. It's about making sure that I make the sacrifices necessary to be there for my family first. When it comes to my job, uh, that was something that was so important. If I have a job that I've had for almost 25 years now, right, at the corporate world, uh, if there was ever a time that my job said, no, you can't do that for your family because we need you here, that would be my last day on the job. That's how important it was for me. So fortunately, I was able to have a job. I have a great job that has allowed me the flexibility to be there for my family. There are sacrifices that I made. I've driven long ways to my office at 4 o'clock in the morning to get to the office to get my work done for the day, so that way I could leave at 2 o'clock and be there for my family or be there for coaching. Um, so those kind of things, it's all about finding balance, Kelly. It really is. And I know that for a lot of parents that or people that have kids that may be watching this, um, listen, there may be part of that. You say, look, I don't have that flexibility, Brian. I don't have that kind of job that's allowed. Well, then you're going to have to find something that allows you that. Because if family is important to you, you'll do whatever it takes to succeed at it, to succeed at being that role model for your family, being that provider for your family. And I think that whatever it is that's important to you, if it's that important to you, you will find a way to make it happen. Whether it's in business, right? Whether it's in business, if you're trying to grow a company, you make the sacrifices to make that company successful. It's the same thing with your family. If your family is that important to you, you will find a way to make it work. And I've found a way to make it work, and it's just through making other sacrifices in other areas. It's not up for negotiation.
So talk to us too about what the military taught you about your family. This is a huge subject for me because my dad was in the military. He was in the Air Force, and growing up, and there was a lot of things that I didn't realize that I got, and that I was so fortunate to be in the environment on an Air Force base, and connected with my friends who I'm still connected with to this day. Um, what were the things that the military taught you about family and about business and about how to be able to be successful at whatever you do?
The military has taught me discipline. That's the end of the. It's what it comes down to. It's your discipline in everything that you do in life. whether it's with your family, whether it's in your business, whether it's in the military. If you're not disciplined in those areas, take the military, for example. If I'm in a war and I don't have the discipline necessary, I will end up dead, or I will end up getting my comrades dead, killed, right? So that's what it comes down to. It's all about discipline and how you structure it. So, yeah, for me, it was the military. I consider, um, I'm very proud of. It's something that, I probably could have stayed in the military, but I wanted to take a chance and get out in what we call the civilian world, and see what else is out there. But the discipline that the military taught me, the structure around family and around what I do in life, I owe it to the military, because if anybody out there is wanting to considering the military, call me up. I'll help you out.
So, Bryan, what would you say is the biggest misconception about the military? Because I think a lot of times, non-military families or people that maybe haven't experienced it, sometimes they're like, "Oh man, I'm scared of it," or whatever it is. For us that have been, like my dad was a veteran, like I said, and with yourself being a veteran, like looking at these things, there's so many amazing positive. My dad got to travel. He grew up in a very small town in Utah. He got to travel all over the world. I was born in England. We lived in Taiwan. We lived in Idaho, Utah, Florida, California. I mean, all over the world. And we had to make fast friends. We had to, connect with people. And those relationships were so huge, and we were forced into this because of the military. What are some of the misconceptions of the military that you could share with our audience?
Well, I think one of them comes down to everybody that thinks about the military think it's dangerous, right? It's not necessarily dangerous unless there's a war. If there's a war, then yes, it could be dangerous. The other thing that I think about is that they think, well, if I'm in the military, I'm going to be moving constantly, so I can't have really a family because I'm going to be up moving. I don't want to uproot my kids every 2 years. That's not necessarily the case. When I was in the military, I was stationed at one station for 4 years. I spent 6 months in Japan, but at this one station, I was stationed for 4 years. You have the choice when you're in the military of where you want to go. And it's one of those things that I think that's the biggest misconception. Now, I do have a friend that's a doctor in the military. He's in the Air Force and he's a doctor, and they move around every 3 years. That's because he wants to. They want the experience of going to these other places. So I think that's probably the biggest misconception. Yeah, I mean, when I'm thinking about it, that's what it is.
So let's dive into the coaching side of you, because I think this is a term that's so loosely used today. And
Mm-hmm.
I've had conversations with my friends because, you'll talk with someone and they'll be like, I'm a coach. Okay, well, what do you coach? And I'm like, I'm a life coach. I'm a this coach. I'm a that coach. You take coaching very seriously. I know that, and I'm not saying an indictment of anybody out there, and not saying you are a coach or you're not. You have to be in these things. But let's talk about what a coach is to you and what it means to you, because I mean you've lived in a coaching realm, whether it be through your sons, or being coaching basketball, and even in the corporate environment you're coaching people. But what does it mean to you, and give us a kind of definition as according to Bryan Ward.
Coaching is mentorship to me. Coaching it's more about the sport. It's more than, excuse me, it's more than the sport that I'm coaching. It's more about bringing up young men, because I coach boys basketball. So bringing up young men, to face challenges, to face adversity, because when they do get out of high school, I coach the high school level. When they do get out of high school, we both know as adults, life's going to hit them on the chin, and they need to be able to handle it. So it's a lot about that. I'm super competitive. I want to win every single game, but it's more about teaching these boys, how do you overcome challenges? How do you maintain not only going to practices and going to these games, but also maintaining your grades, because grades are important. So as far as coaching goes, I want to be that role model for them, to show them, hey, this is how you do it. This is how you overcome this. This is how, and I'm there for them, whether it's on the court or off the court. If I've had players, Kelly, I've had players that have called me up after they graduated high school and said, I'm struggling with something. Can we meet? and I've met, I went to just right before the pandemic hit, I went to lunch with one of my former players because he was struggling with direction in his life.
Mm.
He is 19 years old. He is struggling with what he wanted to do with his life, and he didn't have the guidance at home to give him the support or the um, to kind of help him out on what he should do. And I said, look, this is what I told him. I said, I'll be more than happy to meet with you, but here's how it's going to go. I want to hear what you want to do. I want to hear what your goals are, and I want to hear how you're going to get there. And then I'm going to encourage you and help you along the way. But I'm going to hold you accountable. So I'm also going to check in on you. This isn't going to be like we're going to sit down and break bread together and then we're going to go about our separate ways. I'm going to continue to reach out to you to see if you're still reaching those goals. And so we did. We literally sat down for lunch. We met for 2 hours, and I went through, what do you want to do? He told me. Those kind of conversations. That's why I coach. It's because I want to have that kind of leadership and that kind of mentorship and be that mentor in their life. And it's super important to me. And it's just, I don't know. I just love it, man. I just love it.
Well, you can see it in your face and you hear it in your voice. And for all of us out there, um, you have this wisdom about you, and even spending time with you, on your podcast, you have this wisdom about you. And tell us about some of the hard lessons that you learned in coaching when you learned what coaching wasn't. Like what it was not. You know what it is now, but I think there was a turning point, and I was talking, a shout out to my coach Duffy, because Coach Duffy was my high school coach, and we still stay in touch to this day. The guy is an absolute amazing man, and he was telling me that he was having a talk with a friend of both of ours, which is Coach Rob, and Coach Rob said, when I got to the point where I realized that this coaching was not about me feeling good, but it was about the kids feeling good, it changed everything.
Mm.
What are some of the lessons that you learned that coaching was not? And maybe some specific stories of, because we would like to hear that the fact that Bryan Ward it wasn't always this wise guru coach, that maybe he had some challenges in some coaching and that you ran into some walls.
Yeah. Well, first of all, coaching isn't about the coach. It's about the players. It's about the people that you're trying to bring up. And I think for me, one of the biggest things that I'll be honest, I still struggle with it today is you get to these points where, you win a big game, right? And you think like, oh, wow, I did that. I coached these guys through that. And it's not about you. It's about these guys and teaching them that lesson of winning, right? Teaching them that lesson of fighting through that adversity to get to that point where you win a game. So Coach Rob's right. As a coach, you learn it's not so much about you. It's about these players, and it's about these young men or even young women that you're coaching up. I have had, through my coaching experience, I've coached for 20 years now. There's been many, many challenges that I've faced, not only dealing with my own players, but dealing with other opponents that you face, right? I can remember a time where, as a coach, you're kind of a role model, right? You're kind of a father figure to these kids. And I can remember a point where one of my players in Little League was frustrated about plays that were happening with him. And he went into the dugout and flung his bat across the dugout. And I warned him. I said, hey, don't do that. That's dangerous. And he had such an attitude about it. But the next time he went into the dugout, he did it again. Now, as a dad, I wanted to come unglued, right? I wanted to come unglued on him, and I knew that I couldn't. I had to approach it as a coach. So I put the discipline into his parents' hands. I said, you know what? In my dugout, you don't act like that. You're a player on this team, and I'm the coach, and I'm asking you not to do that, and you did it anyways. In my dugout, you don't do that. So here's what I'm gonna have you do. I'm gonna have you go sit with your mom. And then when you sit with your mom, she can talk to you. And I sent him out of the dugout. He didn't know what was going on. I sent him out of the dugout, and his mom comes up to me after the game. She's like, why did you send him over to me? I said, well, this is what he did. I warned him. He did it again. So I sent him away because I can't have that kind of disruption in the dugout when we're trying to, in the middle of a game. And she thanked me. I think as a coach, it can be challenging because I'm a dad, so it can be challenging to separate parent and coach. And that's one of the things that I struggled with early on. I've got a better grasp of it now. We had a situation at the high school level where we had a player that was being disruptive on the bench, and the head coach called down to him to talk to him, and he ignored him. And after a few times of calling out his name, he continued to ignore him. So the head coach, instead of just coming unglued on him, the head coach said, go sit with your mom in the stands, and sent him away. And he went and sat in the stands. And the crazy thing about that player is it clicked with him because every timeout that we had during that game, he came running across the court and got into our huddle for the timeout to listen to what we were saying to the team. And then at the end of the timeout, when it broke and we went back to the game, he went back over to the stands and sat with his mom. So it showed a lot that he knew what was happening. He understood the point we were trying to send, the message we were trying to send to him. And we talked to him afterwards. We talked to his mom afterwards. And so it ended up working out. So yeah, I think the differences between for a coach, separating the coach and parent role is a challenge.
Well, let's talk about. I mean, let's go into that part of it as far as being a parent, because I think a lot of times, especially in nowadays times, every generation that I find, they have the tendency to say, "I didn't have this, so I want to give this to my kids because I didn't have that." Right? And so they work
Mm-hmm.
really hard, and then they give the kids something that the kid didn't even really need or even want or wasn't even really aware of. But the parent is like, yes, they got every box of cereal that they wanted when I didn't have any, and that's going to make the kid happy. And that doesn't really happen, right? Help us to understand how to know as a dad when to discipline, right? And when to encourage. And help us with this part of it. Cause again, I feel that you should have a long gray beard, and be sitting on top of the hill and everybody coming to you cause you're a very, very wise man. But help us through that. And especially, young dads right now. I mean, when do they know? Because there's the side of it, Bryan, that says, back in my day, my dad just hit me upside the head and I learned really quick. And when I say that, I've said that before. And so when do we know when it's right to discipline?
Do we? Do we know when it's right to discipline? Right? I mean, we could think, any given time that our child messes up or does something that we don't approve of, we should discipline. But that's not necessarily the case. I think I think in each home it could be different, but in our home, I think it's important for our kids to understand the differences between right and wrong, obviously, the differences between what is respectful and what is not. Um, I think it's important for kids to understand manners. And listen, our kids are not going to be perfect. There's no way they're going to be perfect, and you're not going to be perfect parents. We're going to make mistakes. I made plenty of mistakes. Shoot, I'd still make mistakes today. But understanding that I think how you discipline is more important than whether you discipline or not. Okay. So if your son messes up, how do you handle it? And I think for me, early on as a father, one of the biggest things that I struggle with, and it's one of my biggest regrets today, is that when my boys were younger, I was a little harder on them than I probably should have been. And my wife always tried to be the one to kind of calm me down and try to keep me under control. The way I was raised, my dad just came unglued on me. And so I just assumed as I grew up that that's how you handle things. And so I would unload on my boys, and my wife would kind of reel me in. It's like, come on in, right? Get back in here, right? So for me, that's one of the biggest things that I uh, think about as a dad now. I go, man, I was too hard on them at certain times, and I probably shouldn't have been that hard on them, or I could have handled that a little differently. So I think just having this podcast, honestly, what I've learned from my own podcast, listening to other dads in the way that they handle things, and I just go, yeah, I should have done that as a dad. I wish I would have had a podcast that I could have listened to kind of help me learn or navigate my way through parenting. Um, because with my boys, they got the brunt of me when they were younger, and I regret it. Now, my boys, 23 and 20, we're like best friends. Uh, we're great together. We can talk, we can have meaningful conversations, we can have frustrating conversations, but there's no disrespect there, right? I will be there for them no matter what. Uh, and I've always told my boys this: I don't care what you do right, I don't care what you do wrong. I will always be there, and I will always be in your corner. And my boys know that. Um, but discipline wise, how do we know the difference, when to discipline them and when not to? It really comes around to what the circumstance is, what they've done. Um, and then I think what's more important, like I said earlier, is how you discipline, because there are times where you just need to let things go. There's you don't make it worse. Help them. I think guidance is important, helping them understand what they did or didn't do. Talking to them, a conversation is huge. Those are just various, I guess, tips, things that I struggled with as a dad. And like I said, my boys and I are good friends now, but it wasn't always like that when they were growing up.
So, Brian, how is it that in today's society, which is a very much a crush it environment, set lofty goals, write them down, crush the goals, power through it. You can do everything. You got to go, go, go. You got to grind. You got to put your into all this stuff. How do you keep your kids in a place and in a mentality where they're not chasing after riches, where they're not chasing after the things that, I mean, honestly, like uh, I, I get in trouble with this at times when I don't care. When people are constantly like, you need to goal set, goal set, goal set, goal set. And I said, guys, honestly, like if your goals aren't in line with you, the purpose and who you are, then when you get to the end of the goal, it's not going to mean anything anyway. And I've done this. I've done I set this lofty goal and then I go get it and I look around and when I'm done, I'm like, well, then there's always going to be something that I'm chasing. And when I got to a
Hmm.
point where I stopped chasing and I started inviting and I started to accept the greatness inside of me, that really changed everything. In this world, of media and marketing and all these things, how are you able to impart in your kids not to chase after riches?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that our kids today, even younger, whether they're younger or even a little bit older, our kids today have been influenced by so many um, successful people around them, right? Meaning, these athletes, oh, your son thinks she's going to be the next Michael Jordan, that kind of thing. um, or they see these, like your Bill Gates, or all these different leaders that are out there that have really just got these what you call riches. Um, I do see that in I do see that potential in my boys, as far as they think they're going to be that way, and I'm actually okay with that, Kelly. If they have those ambitions to reach that level, kudos to them. Go for it. If you think you can get there, I'll be behind you, everyone. 100%. But what I try to instill in my boys today, and I've done this for many many years, is that I don't care what you do in life. as long as each day you try to get a little bit better. And it's one of the things that I focus on as a human being, as a dad, as a husband, as a role model, as a coach, as a business leader, at the bank. I just want to be a little bit better today than I was yesterday, because over a year's time, if you're just a little bit better each day, imagine how much better you'll be at the end of that year than you were the previous year, right? So teaching my boys, just continue to focus on getting a little bit better each day and watch what happens with your life. So yes, I do think goals are important. I do think writing down goals. I do think trying to achieve those goals are all important. But the biggest thing that I push is just be a little bit better today than you were yesterday.
Well, and I want to do the disclaimer for both of us in the fact of when Brian's talking about setting goals. Goals are amazing. Goals can be in having targets and having plans and things like that. I think what's so great about what Brian just said, though, and what you say, Brian, is that you're more in tune with the character and the way that the kids got there than their actual result. And I think
Mhm.
that is a message that I hear through your podcast. I hear through you all the time. That is so important in today's society, because it's not a bad thing to make millions of dollars, but it
Right.
makes sure that you're doing it in line with who you are, as opposed to trying to copy or carbon copy somebody else's path. And I think that it's so amazing that you have that message as you go. You know what I mean? So help us to if you could, when you look into the screen and talk to the dads out there, what's the important parts? I mean, because for me, when I was growing up, I was like, when I'm a dad, like, I'm gonna have the right car, I'm gonna move to the right neighborhood, like, you know what I'm saying, like, I'm gonna get my kids what they need and they're not gonna want for anything. um in your wisdom, what's the foundation and what's the most important thing as a dad to those young dads out there? Maybe the guy who doesn't know right now, maybe you're listening and you don't know your lady's pregnant right now. So we're going to surprise you. Maybe you just had a baby. Maybe you're 2 years in. Maybe you're a year in. Maybe you're 10 years in. Brian, hit him with some knowledge.
Well, yes. I think what it comes down to for me is, for dads out there that might be watching this, what is your legacy, right? I talk about it a lot on my show, but I think dads realize or don't realize that their legacy really starts in the home, not outside the home. And I think a lot of dads focus on building this. I see it in people that I know that have businesses or companies, and they're so focused, laser focused on growing this business because they think even if you plan on passing it down to your kids, they're so laser focused on building this business that they're missing what's going on at home. And if I could leave anything with anybody that might be watching or listening to this, what is your legacy right now? And if your legacy is your family, meaning your kids, your wife, um, then focus on that. Focus on building that legacy at home, because that's where it starts. If you don't have a family, if you don't have any kids yet, or if your girlfriend has not told you that she is about to have your baby, then do what you need to do to be successful at whatever it is you're doing. But once you have that family, your kids are your legacy. And you have to focus on them first before you can devote time to anything else. Now, I will say this too. If you are growing a business, or if you do work like me in the corporate world, or if you are a coach of some sort, make sure you're continuing to take time for yourself, to, I guess, unwind, kind of get refocused. Because if your fuel tank is on empty at that door at night, and you have nothing left to give your family, then your legacy is dying, right? Your legacy is dying. I think it's important for us as men, even the moms out there. I think it's important for us to know that, taking time for ourselves, kind of that mental health, kind of check in with ourselves, even if it's going for a drive, things like that to kind of help us get realigned with who we are before we step foot in the door to be that all in parent that you need to be for your kids. Those are all important, Kelly. But legacy, ultimately, your legacy starts with your home, inside your home, not outside your home. And for those of you that listen to this, realize it. It's the facts.
Well, I want to give a shout out to all the ladies out there because we're talking about dads, we're talking about this.
Mhm.
Can you give some advice to all the moms out there how to set a great foundation and prop up the dads? And when I say this, I look at my wife, and my wife is so incredible, and she has so much unconditional love. And there's little things like the other day I was working, and she stopped in. She got me not one, but two of my favorite juices. She knows there's this one juice called Dragon's Breath, which sounds bad because Dragon's Breath is not something you want to have. You don't want to have funky breath. But Dragon's Breath is this little shot, and I don't know if it makes you better, but it makes me feel better, and I drink it, and I think like I'm better in the world, right? And then there's another one called Avatar. Well, she not only got me the two juices, but she also got me this avocado toast, super thick toast. It was amazing. And she brought it in and she sat it down. And it made me be a better husband and a better father because I was like, well, damn, if she's going to perform like that, I need to step up my game.
Mhm.
Talk to the ladies out there, some things that they can do to prop up the dads, to help them and prime the soil so the dad can have the best environment to become the best dad.
Well, I think you gave a great example right there. It's all about support. And I do know that, for me, for example, I started this podcast over 2 years ago. My wife thought it was a great idea. Now, keep in mind, my wife is what I call a coach's widow because I'm out coaching in the evening time, right? So she's home. I'm not around, right? She's home. But the one thing that I give credit to my wife because she is so supportive in everything that I do. Does it drive her nuts? Probably. Does she always like it? No. But she's still like, she's my number one fan. She's my number one supporter. And I think as a wife to a husband, um, when they are in the middle of something or whatever it is, whatever it is that their goals or ambitions are, what they want to do as a leader of the family, as a husband or as a father, support is huge. And I'll tell you what, if you are committed to being that supportive spouse and just really pushing your husband to be the best that he can be, I guarantee you he is going to repay you. Trust me. It just happens because, as Kelly just alluded to, you have this kind of husbands get this sense of like, I guess you could call it guilt. Like, wow, she is like completely all in on everything I'm doing. I've got to do something great for her to return the favor. I've got to do something. And you do, you get it back. So it's like, I don't know. It's just my wife. I don't know, man. I can't talk enough about my wife because she is, man. I love her to pieces. She's my number one fan. And I know that this stuff drives her nuts because whether I'm on a podcast or doing a podcast, I'm doing it all the time. But I still take time for her. We still have our times together.
Yeah.
We still take our date. We still have our date nights, those kind of things. But I tell her all the time how much I love her support. And she gives me feedback. I mean, those kind of things are cool. And then she tells me, when I tell her, she'll ask me every single podcast that I do, how did it go? And I go, it was all right, or oh, come on, you did this, you did that great, you did that great. She's constantly like that with me, and it makes me feel great. And in return, all I want to do is give her everything she wants in life, as far as, love, support, gifts, whatever it is, so I think as a spouse, it's important to be supportive of your spouse, whether you're a husband or a wife. Be supportive of your spouse in the things that they're doing because they'll want to return the favor. Trust me.
Well, Bryan, I started the podcast because of two individuals, Maddox and McKenna. Maddox is 10 years old, and McKenna is just turned 13 years old. And I wanted to take iconic people like yourself, and I wanted to show them that the Bryan Wards of the world were not superheroes, that you were just a guy who has a phenomenal attitude and crazy work ethic. What advice would you give to Maddox and McKenna? And if you could use both of their names, it would be amazing.
Maddox and McKenna, the advice that I would give to you is that continue to, I'll say this again. I'll say it because I said it earlier, but I'll say it again, and I'll say it specifically to you two. Make sure that whatever it is you're doing in life, you're doing it to your full potential, and make sure that each day you wake up, your goal for that day is just to be a little bit better than you were yesterday. I preach that to my own boys, and it's something that I try to instill in all the kids that I'm around, even the high school level, all the players that I'm around. So make sure that that's part of your daily goal. When you wake up in the morning, you say your prayer, then you kickstart your day. Make sure that that day is better than it was the day before. And you know what? Support your dad and your mom.
I thank you for that one, man. I want to thank you for being on the show. And now, if you're listening, you're watching. If you're watching on Spotify, I want to thank you. We have the new partnership with Spotify, and now you're able to watch this. You're able to see it. I want you to share it with every single person that you know. Share it with the person who is single, who says, I'm never going to have kids. Share it with the person who's in a relationship that doesn't know that their lady is pregnant right now. Share it with the new dad. Share it with the existing dad. Share it with the mom, the daughter. Bryan's message is, I think, one of the most important messages that we can ever hear. The Dad Up podcast, guys, I believe is changing the world. And if you're listening to one podcast, you need to be listening to that. Now, some of you would be like, well, should I listen to two? If you listen to two, then give us a listen too. But listen to the Dad Up podcast. It'll really change your life. Bryan, I want to thank you again. And if you're listening out there, you know what to do. Click the links, check the sponsors, do all the things that you know you need to do. And share this. Share it as much as humanly possible. But I want to thank you again, Bryan, for being on the show. You have been absolutely phenomenal.
Well, listen, Kelly, I appreciate it. You know I love you to death, and I look forward to our continued friendship. And I'm proud of who you are and the things that you've done in life, and I'm proud of the fact that you're a phenomenal dad. That makes me super happy. The fact that I had you on my show, we were talking all about it and the different stories you were sharing and stuff. But just keep doing what you're doing, man. I'm looking forward to continuing our friendship, brother. And thank you so much again for having me on. It was a lot of fun.
Well, as I told you when we first met, I'm going to force you to be my friend for the rest of your life, so you can't get away from me, man. But I want to thank you again, and you are officially off the hot seat.